Hello and welcome to the report with me, John Rees. Turkey's parliament is set to vote today on whether to join the military strikes against the so-called Islamic State in northern Iraq and Syria. Turkey's President Erdogan and his ruling AKP party support the Turkish involvement in the conflict. But the issue is also tied up with the Turkish state's ongoing attempt to prevent independence for the Kurds who live along the border with Iraq and Syria. Saey has this report.
Turkey will fight against Islamic State and other terrorist groups in the region, but will stick to its aim of seeing Syrian President Bashar al-Assad removed from power.
Ülke olarak her türlü işbirliğine açırız ve hazırız. Ancak şunu da herkes bilmelidir ki Türkiye geçici çözüm arayışlarında kendisini kullandıracak bir ülke değildir. Bunu da özellikle ifade ediyorum.
These were the clearest remarks yet from the Turkish president, indicating that Turkish forces might join a US-led coalition battling the group in Iraq and Syria. His remarks come a day before Parliament votes on motions that may grant his government the authority to send forces into both Syria and Iraq. The advance of Islamic State fighters to within sight of the Turkish army on the Syrian border has piled pressure on Ankara to play a greater role in the US-led coalition, currently carrying out airstrikes against the group in Syria and Iraq. Turkish tanks and armoured vehicles have already taken up position along the border overlooking the besieged Syrian border town of Kobani. And paramilitary soldiers have established road checkpoints after shelling by the Islamic State group intensified, with stray fire hitting Turkish soil on Monday. Ankara has not yet indicated what form its assistance could take, although Erdogan has repeatedly called for a buffer zone on the Turkish border inside Syria, backed by a no-fly zone to ensure its security. And while offering support, Erdogan remains cautious. Turkey fears that US-led airstrikes, if not accompanied by a broader political strategy, could strengthen Assad and bolster Turkish fighters allied to Kurds in Turkey, who have fought for 3 decades for greater autonomy. Erdogan has said that the removal of Assad's government and the upholding of the territorial integrity of Syria remain priorities for Turkey.
Joining me in the studio to discuss this are Hakan Camus, chairman of MUSIAD UK, Turkey's independent industrialists and businessmen's association. And on the line from Doha, we're joined Professor Birol Baskan of Georgetown University's School for Foreign Service in Qatar. Welcome to the programme, both of you. So how big a military intervention will this be if it's approved by the Parliament? Are we just talking about joining in the air raids that have been taking place, or is there going to be a ground invasion?
Most likely scenario, it will be a ground forces that would create the buffer zone that your piece was talking about, rather than Turkey somehow joining the air raids. There's no necessity for them to join in because it's already taken place. If it's proved, then it would be more to do with land forces going in and creating a buffer zone than anything else.
Maybe Professor Baskan, how dangerous a military operation do you think that's likely to be? I mean, this will be the first NATO power to actually engage land forces in this conflict. Professor?
It's very difficult to speak of what kind of dangers might wait when Turkish forces enter into either Syria or Iraq. ISIS or Islamic State is known for very brutal techniques, and then what kind of weapons they have. They can employ against the Turkish armed forces. And also here, we have a clear threat from the PKK too. They say that they don't accept a buffer zone in northern Syria or Iraq, and then they are willing to fight. And to the point that today, actually, the leader of the PKK, Abdullah Öcalan, announced that a buffer zone or it's going to be end of the negotiations between the PKK and Turkey. So it's not just ISIS or the Islamic State, but also the PKK might be involved. Also the other Kurdish forces, the Peshmerga, might be involved in this quagmire. It's really difficult to predict what's really waiting for Turkish armed forces.
I mean, Hakim, lots of people think that the air campaign that's being waged at the moment is creating more of a mess, that it's pushing the Sunni Rising and the ISIS forces together rather than pulling them apart in Iraq, that there's already civilians being hit and so forth. This looks like another twist in the spiral which will make it even more complex.
The real information coming from the ground in North Syria and Iraq really is more than hitting ISIS, as I would like to call them. I don't want to call them Islamic State. They're actually hitting Al-Nusra Front or other small entities that exist there. And ISIS is somehow still moving on with their operations and using clever tactics. As my friend said, there's not much of a prediction as to what would happen if Turkish military goes into these areas. And the quagmire that we're all talking about here is the role that the PYD, which is the Kurdish people who live in the north side of the Syria, the role they will play, the role the PKK will play, and the Peshmerga forces of the Kurdish region government, who are
Do you have the same take as the professor there? That because that's some of the news that I'd heard, that the PKK, and indeed there were demonstrations in Britain over the weekend saying that the buffer state is essentially, I think the Kurds look on it as a Turkish invasion of their territory, don't they?
It is. I mean, the buffer zone, they're talking about up to 20 kilometers inside of both countries, is actually the region occupied by the Kurdish ethnic minorities in those countries. So them having a reaction of this kind is possible. However, they are fighting the ISIS that everybody's trying to somehow deal with. And in fact, PKK forces got defeated and PYD forces got really slaughtered by ISIS forces only recently. They can't deal with it. And they don't have any other force available who can deal with it. So that's why they're trying to get Turkey involved in this. Because besides all these points, Turkey as a state sees this as a threat within its borders because it's so destabilizing the whole area. They must do something. You can't sit there and not do anything about it while you're complaining about the instability that this is all creating. But at the same time, as per what the President said in the Parliament yesterday, they don't want to be used because the Western powers already declared no boots on the ground. And who will do it? You don't have Assad's army, you don't have Iraqi army. The Peshmerga and other PYD forces are so small and really insignificant when it's compared with what ISIS can do and deliver. You only have Turkish army who have the means to deal with it, but the terms and conditions then cannot be dictated by PKK saying, well, we're not accepting a buffer zone that you may create.
Yeah. Professor, just let me ask you about the sort of, well, Turkey is a NATO country. The leading NATO countries who've been involved in the airstrike so far weren't talking at all, in fact, about Turkish involvement with boots on the ground. They were talking about training up a force of 5,000 in Jordan and so forth and so on. Do you think it came as a surprise to them that Turkey was willing to take this step?
Well, I mean, as you know, until the president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, went to New York to attend the UN meeting, Turkey was not talking about any involvement in the campaign except for a military involvement in the campaign. So when Erdogan went to New York, somehow he was persuaded. So a lot of people in Turkey, and including me, is questioning, look at what changed his mind, what changed the government mind. And this government has until recently been refraining, even calling the ISIS terrorist organization. Well, there was a good reason for that, because the ISIS had 94 hostages in their hands, so they could use them against as a shield against Turkey. So something happened in New York, and we don't know the negotiations or what made Erdogan change his course vis-a-vis the ISIS. So there's something fishy here, and then we really don't know why the government of Turkey has changed its discourse and also its position in the military campaign against the ISIS. I guess Turkey is taking enormous risk here by putting the soldiers on the ground, not because it's going to fight the ISIS and also maybe the PKK or the Peshmerga, but also the ISIS might commit to some terrorist acts within Turkey, including Istanbul, Ankara, and then unfortunately there's a serious security problem right now Turkey is facing vis-a-vis the ISIS. If the reports, if the claims are true in the international media that the ISIS have some cells in Turkey, within Turkey, they can mobilize them and then conduct some terrorist acts which might kill civilians as well as some bureaucrats and others. So it's a very, very risky business. So I could understand why Erdogan and then the Turkish government was reluctant to engage in the operation. I mean, they had every reason to be reluctant, but right now they are speaking of with confidence and also even accusing the parties which do not support this authorization with accusing them of like supporting the ISIS or supporting Assad.
Okay, well, that's quite a brave claim by Erdogan, really, isn't it? Because everybody knows that border has been porous. Everybody knows that there have been ISIS fighters being treated over the border in Turkey. Indeed, many people thought that last week, when the hostages were freed, there'd been an exchange of military weaponry to ISIS. So it's a big claim by Erdogan that the opposition parties.
No, what you're saying is not. It's just a claim, and it's not proven. And nor does anybody actually has come up with any evidence of what you're saying. However,
although there was film released of low-loaded rail trucks going across the border with military equipment on it.
No, that idea you're talking about has all been, the allegation that you're talking about has been already dealt with. This is an old story. The story is they had, including several diplomats and their families and the babies and some of the police officers who were protecting the Mosul consulate of Turkey was kidnapped by ISIS, and the operation that was conducted recently to release them has only been completed, and that's why they've been reluctant in engaging in a provocative political act as a Turkish government. Why? Because 49 people, including the families of the diplomats, are valued citizens of Turkey, and whatever needs to be done to protect their life was done, and they've been released now. However, it doesn't justify the fact that when you have your diplomats been kidnapped by these people, you don't go guns blazing. Through somehow ways or means you get them out.
I'm going to have to stop you there. I mean, that is, of course, exactly what the British and American governments do. But never mind. We're going to have to take a break from that story to look at some more of today's headlines. In Afghanistan,